education, a name often represents access, authority, or responsibility. A signature on a document carries power not because of ink, but because of the authority behind it. In the same way, the name of Jesus is not merely a religious expression or a historical identifier. It represents legal authority within a divine system. To understand its power, one must understand how authority functions, not how emotion reacts. A name in legal terms represents identity plus jurisdiction. When a judge speaks, their words carry weight because they operate within an established system of law. Outside that system, the same words would hold no authority. The power of the name of Jesus operates on this same principle. It is effective because it is backed by divine authorization, not human effort. This distinction is essential for accurate understanding and correct application. Many people treat the name as a phrase to be repeated rather than authority to be exercised. Repetition without understanding leads to frustration. Education teaches that tools are only effective when used according to their design. The name of Jesus functions within a framework of faith, alignment, and rightful position. It is not a formula, it is delegated authority. When spoken with understanding, represents heaven's endorsement, not human demand. Letting God handle outcomes begins with recognizing limits of human authority. People often attempt to solve spiritual or life challenges through emotional pressure, control, or fear-driven effort. This misplacement of responsibility creates exhaustion. When authority is properly recognized, responsibility shifts. Humans act in obedience and faith, while God governs outcomes, timing, and power. This transfer is not passive, orderly. Understanding the legal power of the name produces confidence without arrogance. Confidence comes from knowing one is authorized, not from personal strength. A person operating under authority does not need to shout, force, or panic. Their assurance comes from legitimacy. This is why peace accompanies true authority. Chaos thrives where authority is misunderstood, but order follows correct alignment. Educationally, this principle teaches discipline of thought. Instead of reacting emotionally to circumstances, individuals trained in authority-based faith respond with clarity. They understand that challenges do not cancel authority. Just as laws remain valid during crisis, divine authority remains intact during pressure. This awareness stabilizes the mind and prevents fear from dictating behavior. Another critical result is ethical restraint. Legal authority always operates within boundaries. Misused authority becomes abuse. The name of Jesus is not a tool for manipulation or personal gain. It operates within righteousness, humility, and alignment with divine will. This teaches moral responsibility alongside spiritual confidence. Authority without character is dangerous. Authority with integrity produces life. When God is allowed to handle outcomes, the name is no longer used as a last resort, but as a position of trust. Individuals stop striving to control every result and begin to operate from obedience and faith. This produces patience, because timing is no longer forced. Also produces endurance, because pressure no longer signals failure but process. The practical effects of this understanding are visible. Fear diminishes because authority is clear. Consistency increases because action is no longer emotion-driven. Decision-making improves because responsibility is properly assigned. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. These are educational outcomes, observable, measurable, and sustainable. Ultimately, understanding the legal power of the name teaches structure, order, and trust. It reveals that spiritual authority is not mystical confusion, but governed reality. When individuals operate within that reality and let God handle what only God can handle, life moves from strain to stability, from fear to confidence, from effort-driven struggle to authority-governed living. The concept of a name carrying legal power is rooted in authority, representation, and recognized standing. Structured systems, law, governance, education, or institutions. A name is never merely a label. It represents position, rights, and delegated power. When applied to spiritual understanding, The name of Jesus functions in the same way. It signifies authority that has been established, validated, legally recognized within a divine framework. Understanding this shifts the name from religious language into a principle of lawful operation. In legal systems, authority is exercised through authorization. An individual cannot act on behalf of a government, court, or organization without legal permission. When such permission is granted, actions taken in that name carry the same weight as if performed by the authority itself. This principle explains why the name of Jesus is described as powerful, not because of pronunciation, repetition, or emotion, but because it represents delegated authority. The power lies in what the name stands for, not in the sound of the word. Without this understanding, people reduce the name to a symbolic or emotional expression. When that happens, its effectiveness appears inconsistent. Education clarifies that authority functions only when it is understood and applied correctly. A legal document signed without understanding its authority has no practical effect. Similarly, invoking a name without understanding its legal standing produces confusion rather than confidence. Knowledge restores effectiveness. Legal power of a name also implies responsibility. Acting in an authorized name requires alignment with the values, laws, and intentions of the authority granting it. Professional environments, misuse of authority leads to consequences. Spiritually, the same principle applies. The name of Jesus operates within the boundaries of righteousness, truth, and divine order. This is why understanding precedes results. Authority is not manipulated, it is honored and applied. Another educational dimension of legal power is representation. When someone acts in a legally recognized name, they are not acting independently. Their personal limitations are secondary to the authority they represent. This removes pressure from the individual and transfers responsibility to the source of authority. Practical terms. This produces confidence without arrogance and humility without weakness. Individual understands that effectiveness does not come from personal strength, but from lawful representation. Legal authority also provides access. In structured systems, access is granted through credentials. A badge, signature, or name opens doors that would otherwise remain closed. The name of Jesus functions as access to divine provision, protection, and governance. This access is not emotional or symbolic, it is lawful. Understanding this prevents desperation and reinforces confidence. Instead of striving to earn access, individuals learn to operate from granted authority. Stability is another outcome of understanding legal power. Emotional belief fluctuates, but legal standing does not change with feelings. Once authority is granted, it remains valid regardless of emotional state. This explains why understanding the legal power of the name produces consistency in faith and action. Individuals stop depending on mood, fear, or circumstances and begin depending on established authority. This stability improves decision-making and long-term growth. From an educational perspective, understanding also reframes prayer and action. Instead of pleading or begging, communication becomes declarative and aligned with authority. In legal terms, one does not beg for rights that are already granted, one exercises them appropriately. This does not eliminate humility, but it removes insecurity. Humility recognizes authority, security questions it. The name of Jesus invites humility rooted in confidence, not fear. Understanding legal power also strengthens moral clarity. Authority always operates within law. When individuals understand the authority behind the name, they are less likely to compromise values or misuse spiritual language for personal gain. This produces ethical consistency. Education is incomplete without ethics. Legal authority reinforces responsibility alongside power. Finally, recognizing the legal power of the name transforms identity. Individuals no longer see themselves as powerless participants in life, but as authorized representatives operating under divine order. This does not promote dominance or control over others. It promotes disciplined living, responsibility, and service. Authority understood correctly produces order, not chaos. In summary, the name of Jesus is not powerful because it is spoken, repeated, or emotionally charged. It is powerful because it represents legally established authority, delegated responsibility, and recognized standing within divine law. Understanding this shifts faith from emotion to education, from uncertainty to confidence, and from struggle to ordered action. Explaining how legal power operates within spiritual structure rather than emotion or ritual. In any organized system, legal, educational, or governmental, authority is never random. It is delegated, recognized, and exercised within defined boundaries. Understanding this principle is essential to grasping how divine authority functions in human life. Authority does not originate from personal strength or moral effort, granted and activated through alignment with a higher governing order. Legal power functions on representation. A judge, an ambassador, or an officer does not act in personal capacity but under delegated authority. Their words carry weight because they represent a system greater than themselves. In the same way, spiritual authority is not self-generated. It operates through representation of divine will. When this distinction is misunderstood, people attempt to produce results through intensity, repetition, or emotional force, which leads to frustration and inconsistency. Authority responds to order, not emotion. Letting God handle it begins with recognizing jurisdiction. Human beings are not designed to govern outcomes that belong to divine authority. Timing, transformation, provision, final results exist outside human jurisdiction. When individuals attempt to control these areas, they violate spiritual order. Much like a student attempting to override an instructor, or a citizen attempting to rewrite law. This violation produces anxiety because the mind is operating beyond its authorized limits. Education teaches that operating outside one's authority leads to failure. Regardless of effort, understanding delegated authority restores peace because responsibility is correctly distributed. Human responsibility lies in obedience, alignment, disciplined action. Divine responsibility lies in enforcement, outcome, and fulfillment. When this separation is respected, effort becomes effective rather than exhausting. Person no longer struggles to make things happen, but works within a framework where outcomes are governed by a higher power. This is not passivity, strategic alignment. Legal authority also functions through spoken declaration. In law, words spoken under authority enact real consequences. Contracts bind, verdicts release or restrain, and commands initiate action. Similarly, spiritual authority operates through informed speech aligned with divine truth. Words spoken without authority are noise. Words spoken with authority are commands. This explains why understanding precedes effectiveness. Without knowledge, speech lacks jurisdiction. Education empowers authority by clarifying what can be spoken, when and under what conditions. When God is allowed to handle enforcement, individual is freed from fear of resistance. Authority does not argue with opposition, it overrides it. Fear exists where authority is unclear. Once authority is understood, confidence replaces hesitation. This confidence is not arrogance but certainty rooted in order. A teacher confident in curriculum does not fear questions. A legally authorized official does not fear challenge. In the same way, spiritual confidence arises from knowing that authority does not rest on personal strength but divine backing. Another critical aspect is accountability. Delegated authority always includes accountability to the source. Letting God handle outcomes keeps individuals accountable to alignment rather than results. Prevents corruption, pride, and manipulation. When success is attributed to personal power, humility erodes. When authority is understood as delegated, gratitude and discipline remain intact. This produces ethical strength and long-term stability. Authority also operates consistently, not selectively. Emotional approaches fluctuate, but legal authority remains steady regardless of circumstances. When individuals rely on feelings, their confidence rises and falls with conditions. When they rely on delegated authority, Their stance remains firm even under pressure. This consistency is vital for leadership, education, and personal development. Stability influences others more than intensity ever could. Misunderstanding authority leads to spiritual burnout. People exhaust themselves trying to enforce what they were never authorized to control. Letting God handle it eliminates this burden. Energy is redirected from anxiety to obedience, from striving to learning. This shift improves mental health, focus, and decision-making. Education thrives where the mind is not overwhelmed by illegitimate responsibility. Finally, recognizing divine delegation reframes struggle. Resistance is no longer interpreted as failure, but as evidence that authority is being exercised. In structured systems, resistance often confirms legitimacy rather than denies it. Understanding this prevents discouragement and withdrawal. Authority does not retreat under pressure, stands firm within its mandate. In this way, transferring the burden to God is not surrendering responsibility, but honoring structure. Legal power functions when authority is recognized, delegated, and trusted. When individuals operate within this order, life becomes governed rather than chaotic, purposeful rather than pressured, and effective rather than exhausting. Understanding the practical implications of the name of Jesus transforms belief from abstract theology into functional living. When the name is recognized as carrying authority, representation, and legitimacy, it changes how individuals engage with fear, responsibility, and decision-making. Authority, by definition, is only meaningful when it is exercised. Educationally, a concept that remains theoretical produces little impact, but when applied, it restructures behavior and outcomes. The name operates not as a symbolic phrase, but as a legal authorization that empowers action within defined boundaries. One of the most immediate outcomes of this understanding is confidence rooted in legitimacy rather than emotion. Many people struggle with insecurity because they act from personal strength alone. When authority is understood as delegated, confidence no longer depends on self-assessment but on authorization. In legal systems, ambassador does not act based on personal power but on the authority of the office they represent. Similarly, acting in the name of Jesus produces assurance because the authority behind the action exceeds the individual, stabilizes behavior under pressure, and reduces hesitation born from self-doubt. Another measurable outcome is clarity in spiritual responsibility. Confusion often arises when individuals attempt to resolve issues that exceed human jurisdiction. Legal authority defines responsibility. What is within one's control and what is not? When the name is understood properly, individuals learn to act where they are authorized and trust God where authority remains divine. This separation prevents burnout caused by over-assumption of responsibility. Educational systems emphasize role clarity to improve performance. Spiritual clarity functions the same way, producing focus and efficiency rather than anxiety. Exercise of authority through the name also produces consistency in moral and ethical decisions. When actions are guided by personal preference or situational pressure, behavior fluctuates. Authority establishes standards that do not change with mood or circumstance. Acting in the name means acting in alignment with established principles rather than impulse. This creates integrity, which is consistency between belief and behavior. Integrity strengthens leadership, credibility, and trust, qualities essential for influence and growth. Another outcome is the regulation of speech and thought. Legal authority is often exercised through declaration rather than force. Understanding the power of the name reshapes language patterns. Instead of reactive speech filled with fear, complaint, or doubt, communication becomes deliberate and aligned with truth. This is not denial of reality, but correct interpretation of reality. Cognitive studies show that language influences perception and behavior. When speech aligns with authority rather than fear, internal dialogue stabilizes and external actions follow with discipline. Understanding also impacts how opposition is faced. Challenges are no longer interpreted as personal attacks or signs of failure, but as circumstances subject to higher authority. This reframing increases resilience. Instead of withdrawing under pressure, individuals remain engaged, knowing they are not acting alone or without backing. Resilience grows when adversity is viewed through the lens of authority rather than vulnerability. Educational resilience depends on reframing failure as feedback. Spiritual resilience depends on recognizing that authority outlasts opposition. Peace is another practical result. Peace emerges not from the absence of conflict, but from the presence of order. Authority creates order by defining jurisdiction and outcome. When individuals act in the name with understanding, internal conflict decreases because decisions are no longer driven by fear of consequences. Peace becomes a governing state rather than a temporary feeling. This peace improves learning capacity, relational health, and long-term vision. The name also shapes prayer and expectation. Requests shift from pleading to alignment. In legal terms, petitions are effective when they are filed under proper authority. Understanding the name changes prayer from emotional appeal to informed request. This produces confidence and patience, as outcomes are trusted to the authority behind the request rather than the intensity of the petitioner. Educational maturity is shown when students understand process rather than panic. Spiritual maturity follows the same pattern. Finally, authority of the name produces a disciplined life orientation. Discipline thrives when purpose is clear and authority is acknowledged. Actions become intentional rather than reactive. Time, energy, and focus are managed with greater wisdom because life is no longer driven by urgency, but by alignment. This results in sustainable growth rather than short-term effort. When the name is understood as carrying legal authority, life shifts from struggle-based effort to order-based action. Fear diminishes, clarity increases, and responsibility is correctly assigned. The result is a life governed not by pressure, but by purpose, stability, and confident obedience to established authority.